Explosive reveal. Michelle Rempel destroys liberals. Immigration lies exposed. In a recent interview, Michelle Rempel Garner sharply criticized the Liberal government's approach to immigration, highlighting a significant and growing disconnect between Ottawa's policies and the challenges faced by everyday Canadians. She emphasized that immigration has increasingly become more of a numbers game, merely a statistical exercise, rather than a thoughtful policy that balances labor needs with the imperative of social stability. According to Garner, this trend has led the federal government to allow immigration levels to surge to record highs while neglecting to address the serious consequences that arise from such decisions. These consequences manifest in the form of rising costs of living, overwhelmed housing markets, and an economy where young Canadians are increasingly struggling to find stable work. Youth unemployment is not a distant concern. It is a pressing reality that affects communities across the nation. Reports from various provinces indicate that young people are encountering significant difficulties in securing stable employment, even in sectors that continue to rely on temporary foreign workers for labor. This contradiction not only highlights a failure of government planning but also underscores a troubling and systemic issue. Instead of ensuring that Canadian youth are adequately trained and equipped to fill available positions, the immigration system has defaulted to importing labor. Consequently, a generation of young Canadians finds themselves underemployed and facing uncertain futures. For those students graduating with mounting debt and entering a fragile job market, this imbalance fosters a growing sense of frustration and resentment toward the government and its policies. Garner argues that the government currently lacks a coherent strategy to effectively link immigration policy with labor market needs. While employers may experience short-term relief through the hiring of temporary foreign workers, the long-term repercussions for Canadian workers, especially younger workers, are stark. They pay the price in lost opportunities, stagnant wages, and an increasingly competitive job market where their skills and aspirations are overlooked. Meanwhile, families across the country are struggling to find affordable housing in markets where demand has far outstripped supply. This situation is exacerbated in large part due to Ottawa's aggressive immigration targets, which have not been matched by corresponding increases in housing availability. The Liberal government's unwillingness to reconcile these realities is creating social pressure that will only intensify as more Canadians feel the weight of these unresolved issues. Furthermore, the immigration minister has been largely absent this summer, failing to provide any meaningful reforms or a clear vision for how to balance humanitarian goals with economic realities. This silence reflects a broader pattern within the Liberal Party: grand announcements, lofty targets, and little follow-through. The emphasis remains on headline numbers rather than tangible outcomes for Canadians who are directly affected by these policies. Garner warns that unless immigration policy begins to reflect the lived experiences of families across the nation, Ottawa risks further eroding public trust, a trust that is already fragile and in jeopardy. Mark Carney, who is poised to lead the Liberals into the next election, serves as an emblematic figure of this disconnect. His technocratic background and established ties to global financial institutions suggest a continuity of approach rather than any meaningful change. Carney frames immigration and labor policy primarily as macroeconomic tools, treating them as elements of economic strategy rather than issues intricately tied to the affordability and fairness for working Canadians. This approach may resonate well with political elites and economic strategists, but it does little to address the palpable frustration of ordinary citizens who are caught in the squeeze of high rents, insecure jobs, and inflationary pressures that seem to spiral out of control. The core of the problem does not lie in immigration itself, but rather in the lack of integration with other critical policy areas. Housing shortages, underfunded education systems, and stagnant wages all intersect with migration levels in ways that are often overlooked by policymakers. A responsible government would take proactive steps to calibrate immigration policy to ensure that Canadian citizens are not left behind in the pursuit of economic growth. Instead, Ottawa has pursued policies that only serve to worsen divides and fuel skepticism among its citizens. Garner's critique should also be viewed as a warning for the future. If young Canadians perceive no viable path to stability, their frustration will only deepen, and their trust in institutions will continue to erode. Policymakers cannot simply rely on the importation of temporary foreign workers while ignoring the aspirations and potential of Canadian youth. Nor can they expand immigration indefinitely without addressing the pressing housing crisis that is pushing many families to the brink of financial distress. A sustainable immigration policy must align labor, housing, and education with realistic immigration levels that consider the needs and capacities of Canadian society. Looking at the broader picture reveals a government preoccupied with image rather than substantive outcomes. The Liberal Party has treated immigration as a branding exercise, a means to project an image of openness and inclusivity on the international stage, while sidestepping tough questions about how to ensure that the system works effectively for Canadians first. Carney's rhetoric suggests more of the same, a focus on numbers, targets, and elite talking points that remain disconnected from the daily struggles faced by ordinary Canadians. Garner emphasizes that the alternative to the current trajectory is not about closing doors to newcomers, but about building a system that is fair, balanced, and rooted in the realities faced by Canadians today. Immigration should be a tool that strengthens the economy, not one that undermines opportunities for young people. It should facilitate community growth rather than drive housing costs beyond the reach of many families. The failure to balance these competing priorities is at the heart of public frustration and, unless addressed, will remain one of the defining political battles in the years ahead. In conclusion, the issues raised by Garner are not merely abstract criticisms. They represent real challenges that affect millions of Canadians. As the country grapples with these intertwined issues of immigration, labor, housing, and education, it is imperative that policymakers take a holistic approach that prioritizes the needs of Canadian citizens. Only by doing so can we hope to build a society that is equitable, thriving, and capable of meeting the aspirations of all its members, particularly the youth who are the future of the nation.